let's talk about accents and pronunciation. I'll give you some tips to improve your pronunciation in whatever language you're trying to learn. But also, let's address my own accent in English because this is something that I get asked about all the time in the comment section. A lot of people try to guess where I'm from, or they have an idea of where I'm from, and then they realize that I'm from a completely different place, that speak a different language, was native speaker. A lot of other people also have strong opinions about my accent. Let's talk about that first. I'll explain a little bit how I ended up having this accent. But first, let me know in the comments what you think about my accent. Is it good? Does it sound like a native speaker? Does it not? How bad is it? Where do you think I'm from? If you don't already know, let me know. Just pause the video. Let me know in the comments what you think about my accent and what kind of accent it sounds like. What region you'd think I'm from just by listening to me. Anyway, let's address my accent. So, for those of you who don't know, I come from the Basque Country. That's in Spain. It's in the north of Spain, but we speak a completely different language here. We speak Basque, Euskera, which is one of the oldest, if not the oldest language in Europe. It's non-Indo-European, so it's completely different from all the other languages. Completely different vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation as well. So that's why someone asked me recently. Uh, they asked me where I was from, and when I said from a region in Spain, they were like, "You have your accent doesn't sound Spanish at all." And my answer was, "My accent doesn't sound Spanish in Spanish either." Um, well, kind of does, but if you ask someone from Madrid to listen to me speak Spanish, they'll immediately know I'm from the Basque Country because we have a very specific way to pronounce certain sounds in Spanish. Well, in Basque as well. The R's, the Z, the S, etc. We R's, S's, and R's. That's way stronger than in Spanish. Yeah. So even if I don't notice it myself that much, I do have an accent in Spanish as well. Even if I sound like a native speaker, I sound like a native speaker from the Basque country. So in English, I started out with that accent as well, with my Basque accent, because the school system is quite bad when it comes to teaching you pronunciation, and nobody corrected pronunciation in English. So the first time I started speaking English with foreigners, my accent was terrible. Uh, I don't really, I can't really, I don't really have an example to compare because you'll immediately think of some stereotypical Spanish speaker, actor or something. And I didn't sound like that because, again, I have a different accent because my native language is different. Um, there are some things that sound similar to how a Spanish speaker would say them, but there are many other things that I would say different, especially consonants like Z's, S's, and R's. R's. Um, but then I moved to Germany, and I've lived in Germany and Austria for a while, and my German wasn't good yet, so I mostly spoke English then. So I ended up acquiring the local accent. I still had my accent, my previous accent, so I got a mixture of both. I often, um, I, a lot of people often thought I came from Germany simply because, not Germans themselves, obviously, but native English speakers would think I came from Germany simply because I sounded like kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger when I was speaking English. But that was a while ago. Excuse me. Since then, I worked on improving my accent, specifically trying to sound more British for various reasons. Most of the people I know, uh, most of the English speakers I know, uh, British English, not American English, and I honestly think sounds better as well. No offense to anyone, Americans out there, but I think British sounds classier, nicer. So, uh, and because I was hanging out with British English speakers, I decided to choose that one. Also, the people who were going to test me in the Cambridge C2 exam, the speaking exam, were likely, and they were, they ended up being British. So, knowing that also, that was another reason to try to mimic a British accent. I don't think I sound 100% British, not at all, but I think I'm 90% there for the most part. Um, this is why, when it comes to my accent and my pronunciation in English, a lot of Americans, especially those who haven't been exposed much to British English, a lot of Americans think my accent's worse than it really is. Because if you ask British speakers, they'll say it's pretty good. For the most part, I think I've got most sounds. Uh, I think most sounds I do them pretty well. I occasionally pronounce some V's as B's, um, like every Spanish speaker does, or Basque. There's no V sound in Basque either. Um, some vowel clusters, still make some weird sounds here and there. But for the most part, I think it sounds relatively British these days, while still maintaining some German and some Basque from my native language and my experiences in Germany. So that's the explanation behind my accent. Now, my advice: how to improve your accent. And someone was telling me, by the way, recently in the comments that my accent uh, seems to have improved a lot the last few months, which I don't find very likely because I haven't really done anything to work on my accent. My accent gets better and worse depending on the day. If I'm really trying to sound British, I will sound way more British, but also it's more effort. So if I'm rambling for an hour talking about, or I'm ranting, I'm talking about some topic on my own, also, there's no native speaker in front of me, I will probably deviate a lot more from a native sounding accent because I'm not focusing that much on that. Especially if I'm speaking in front of a camera with no script, I just have to come up with things to say, right? So yeah, it's hard to maintain the same level of accent the whole time, especially if you're talking a lot. If you are reading aloud or if you are talking to someone, you getting feedback. You getting first of all, you hearing their accent, so you're naturally subconsciously mimicking, but also you are yeah, you have to think less because you it's an interaction, right? You speak, you take turns in a conversation. Just they come up with a sentence, and then you have to think of an answer to that, and then you say something else. You don't have to just speak the whole time, which is much harder to do. Try speaking in front of a camera for 10 minutes, even in your native language. You'll probably struggle to come up with things to say, and you won't sound all that articulate. But yeah, this one, Steven says your English accent seems to have changed over the couple of months and sounds more native-like. That's the thing. I don't know where Steven's from, but he's probably American, I would say, because then he says, would aspirate the P and the T in ChatGPT much more, but otherwise the change in your accent is very noticeable. Why though? I don't think I haven't done any specific work on my accent, and I'm not trying to sound more American, except in that video where I impersonated Joko Willink, or tried to at least. Um, ChatGPT. That's the thing. There are some sounds like the T that is completely different from American T, and the British T are often different. Yeah. So chat Americans would say something like chat GPT. Like it sounds more, it turns into like a D sound sometimes. So D. Well, I can't really do it. Um, better, butter. Yeah, British English. Well, sometimes it gets glottalized, right? But I can't really do that either. But T, a British T sounds way more. And I don't really know the technical terms for this thing, but British T will be an American day. Yeah, things like that. Where an American will think, "Oh, that doesn't sound like a native speaker. Like you've got an accent." Well, everyone has an accent. Um, some other native speakers pronounce it like that, and I'm not claiming to speak like a native speaker. I don't yet. No, I probably never will. But my point is, for Americans, I sound less like a native speaker than for British English speakers, simply because I sound way more different to what they used to. In any case, enough talking about my English. I think it's pretty good. It's good enough to rant here and ramble about whatever topic you asked me about. Um, my advice, if you want to improve your pronunciation, mostly two things. Number one is listening more, and specifically listening to people you want to sound like. If you want to learn a specific accent, if you learn in Spanish and you want to learn to speak Argentinian Spanish, then mostly listen to Argentinian Spanish audio. But that's one thing that you should do. Mostly listen to the kind of accent you want to acquire, but also a lot of listening and repeating. Yeah, same sentences over and over again. Pay close attention to how they pronounce things, and also record yourself, and then listen to the whole thing, the originals and yours, and do it over and over again. It's hard work. It's deliberate practice, but it works. If you do it consistently over and over again, you end up developing a decent accent in any language. But you have to do a lot of that, a lot of listening, and then a lot of listening and repeating. By the way, the part about listening to the kind of accent or dialect you want to sound like, it's not something I recommend doing from the very beginning. If you're a beginner, just listen to very standard Spanish or English or whatever you. I know there's no standard English, but try to listen to a little bit of everything so that you can understand everyone in the end. Yeah. The part about the pronunciation work, the listening to a specific accent and mimicking it and shadowing it and doing lots and lots of reps of listening, repeating, and shadowing and so on, trying to sound as close as possible. You should do that once you are relatively fluent in the language. Yeah, I did all this when preparing for my C2 exam for English. Um, of course, you need to work on your accent beforehand, but don't focus all your listening on one type of uh, accent, simply because you need to be able to understand everyone. So try to listen to a little bit of everything, even if you listen to the kind of accent that you want to develop more. Yeah, you should listen more to the kind of accent you want to develop, but also listen to everything else, because it will also help you learn the differences. But in general, just listen to everything in general, and once you understand very well, focus on listening to the accent you want to develop. That's my advice. Apart from listening and repeating, and getting feedback from a native speaker, that's also really important. Not vital. You can still improve without feedback from a native speaker, but it helps a lot. Um, they'll help you. They'll help you fix some mistakes, correct some mistakes that you might be making that you aren't aware of, even if you're doing all the other exercises. Even if you're listening and repeating, and you are uh, then listening to yourself repeat the sentences, maybe your ear is not trained and for that specific for those sounds from that language. So maybe you don't notice specific things that a native speaker will notice. That's also helpful. Retrieval practice is extremely useful for grammar, spelling, and vocabulary mistakes. But for pronunciation, a native speaker is actually obviously better. Anyway, this is my advice on improving your pronunciation and your accent, and also that's the story of my accent. I don't sound like a native speaker. I probably never will, although I might try to get better. That's a thing, though. I was listening to myself, and I don't really like listening to myself. I don't hate it as much as I used to, honestly. But most people, but I think everyone hates listening to themselves. But right, I think after a while you get used to it. But I was listening to myself, trying to analyze my accent before this video, and I couldn't really find anything uh, that sounds very different from how native British speakers, nat- native British English speakers pronounce things. I know there are some things here and there, but I also showed it to native speakers, and they were like, "No, mate, that's for the most part, there's nothing significant there to correct." So yeah, there are, it's like something that's something that's almost the same thing, but this it's got something that you don't know how to explain that gives away. I think it's just maybe it's connected speech where I put the stress sometimes in the sentences, or I use weird phrasal verbs sometimes, or prepositions. There are things like that. Yeah, but again, 100% native like I probably could do it if I spend the next 3 to 6 months just focusing on that. But again, I've got better things to do, like learning other languages. But anyway, I'll continue getting better. So should you. Focus on improving your accent if it's terrible. Once it's good enough, okay, it's good enough. But you should do some work on your accent anyway.